Welcome to Soul Brew, where healing conversations flow as freely as the tea. Join us as we dive deep into the depths of the human experience, one sip at a time. Grab your favorite mug, settle into a cozy spot, and chime in on a conversation that will nourish your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our episode of Soul Brew, Healing Conversations Over Tea. I'm Rae, your host, and today we have my dear friend Mahmoud. We have been friends for, God, what is this, 4 or 5 years at this point. We've been studying
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
the universal laws together. We've had a mastermind together, and we've just been on each other's spiritual growth paths. So today I've invited him to have a conversation. We have such good conversations all the time. So I wanted to just bring him in and invite these conversations to you all. So Mahmoud, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate this.
So we were talking a little bit before of like how do I even introduce you? He does so many dynamic things. There's so many things that come up in conversations. So what I will do is I will let you introduce yourself. How would you introduce yourself and all the things that you do in this world?
Okay, for what I do by trade,
Yeah.
which generates 90% of the revenue to have me live at the level of which I'm living is in real estate. You know, I'm a licensed practitioner. I've been selling for about 20 years now. And I have done a lot of other things along the way, including, but not limited to, being a teacher. Oh my goodness. And looking back now as I'm thinking about it, I started this whole teaching practice when I was in the military. That's funny. It never occurred to me to even mention. So I was in the Marine Corps, gosh, for 8 years active. I did another 6 in the Army. The National Guard is the reserve arm of the U.S. Army. So they call them National Guard. So I was in the Guard um, here in Michigan after my active duty tour for 8 years. Before that, when I was in the Marine Corps, toward the end of my tour of duty, I became an instructor. That's where it all started, as a communications instructor. Wow.
That's where,
So
wait, what are you
the,
referring to? That's where what all started? Your origin story started as a communications.
no, the teaching, the drive for teaching.
Ah, okay, okay. Yes.
So and I learned that when I teach, I learn,
Hmm.
and I learn to teach. And then when I learn how to teach, to have people get what I'm teaching, I discover, something about myself.
Yeah. What would you say is
And
your
it's not,
favorite topic? What's your topic of choice that you have decided to teach? Because I know from the capacities that we work together, we talk about spirituality and universal laws. But I also know you're a yoga teacher, and but you also teach, so many other things. What's the number one thing that you enjoy teaching?
um, well, it's inspiration. I like to teach conversations around inspiring human beings. Inspiration would include self improvements. Inspiration would include um, let's see, you know, things that have to do with health and healing. So, but it's all wrapped up in one, really, at the end of the day. I did a program with Landmark Education. I became, what do you call it, an introduction leader. Uh, an introduction leader would and I would coach. I also did a lot of coaching in that space
Mm.
because that was me. That was my self expression in the world. Is really giving to others what I've gleaned over the years and how to empower people.
Yeah, Landmark,
So
creating possibilities for showing people how to create
yeah,
possibilities in their life.
abilities, how to empower yourself, how to inspire yourself, how to transform. So it's all wrapped in um, that thing we called transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I've been in this transformation conversation at a wide range of subjects that's covered
What would you
that
say
even
is
led to.
what would you say is the thing that like propelled you into this type of, this path, basically, this work that you're doing of inspiring people? What in your story impacted this change to be able to do that or want to do that?
Well, it's really hard to say. I'm just thinking of when I was in the Marine Corps. I was into the whole religious thing, you know. And at the core, I am either all in or I'm out. There's no halfway. Um, and then I got into the spiritual thing, and yeah, I think that's where it started. Looking back now, you know, so I learned a lot about the Bible. I learned a lot reading, studying, practicing the scriptures, practicing how to live, because the Bible is like an instructional manual. Um, that's where it all started, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then along the way, you start noticing your peripheral view became wider. I could see things that are in congruence with that spiritual component. You know, so we're actually surrounded. Everything we do, live, and do, we're surrounded by these spiritual structures. But you got to notice it, and that's what started it all.
Wanting
So
to
I joined the military.
noticing everything, noticing how I guess that's even how like you and I work together is like we are in the notice. And so to explain to everyone, Mahmoud and I meet or have met every 2 weeks for the past 3 or 4 years. I don't know time at this point, but
About
and
three or
we
four, going to four now.
fourth year, yeah, there we go. And we meet online with a group of other individuals and we study the universal laws. And by study, I don't mean like we sit there and read a book and we, go through the lines of what the book means. It's more we consider what the universal law is and then we consider how it's showing up in our lives. So we'll share based on what showed up in our lives. So we are doing law of correspondence as we record this right now, and we will show up and we will say, how is this law showing up in our life? And we're just coming off of the law of vibration. So being able to see and share from that experience of I saw or I could understand how like anxiety gives me this vibration in my body and I could change that vibration by thinking about other thoughts. Like we show up and as a group we all share in these experiences and they kind of feed off of each other. So that's the capacity that we see each other and we grow with each other. And so much comes in this within these groups. There's no shame, there's no right or wrong way, there's no book that we're reading about it. We're just considering it in our life. And so that is kind of what I think Mahmoud, or what I enjoy about Mahmoud, is he's always in his experience, like always seeing things and feeling into things, and then applying that to life. So that's my how I receive Mahmoud. But yeah, so I guess with that introduction of what we do and how we study the universal laws, like maybe we could talk about how or why you even wanted to start studying the universal laws and why they're important to you.
Well, it goes beyond that. The groups that you're describing is masterminds, right? And um, mastermind is when like-minded people come together and then they co-create. So in co-creation, there is no end to to co-creation. It's like living in the sea of motion, like Bob says. We live in a sea, an ocean of motion. So, and living in this sea, in this ocean of motion, there's a lot that gets cooked up. There's a lot that comes up. So the ocean of motion, life is an ocean of motion, and a lot of things get stirred up. From the bottom that finds its way to the top, and then we get together and we're doing this work. It's actually a spiritual work, because through time, there's always somebody always defines. When people get together, even the scriptures talk about that. Like minds get together, and then magic happens. Um, what's the guy that created? Forgot his name now. It talks about mastermind, and Bob talks about masterminding. Um, when like-minded people get together, that's it's amazing what comes up of it. But we just don't. At the end of a conversation, a period, we leave with something, and that something is running in the background. So that's some of the powers of being in a group, like-minded group, or being in a mastermind, like-mindedness. When we leave with something, but it's like it's emotion. It keeps running, and every time that happens, things open up. So we have different conversations about different laws and how it affects us, and how we get to live this law, because you can't share something you're not living. So there's a disconnect. So that's how it all started, from that whole spiritual thing. So actually, the more we look at it, it reminds me of how it's a spiritual exercise that has no end to it, unless somebody chooses to leave and go do something else, right? Which everybody has a choice. Um, but the longer I've noticed, the longer I've stayed in these conversations, I've become a better person. Actually, I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with like what I'm creating in the world. Um, I'm operating at a different space we call frequency. And when I'm not operating in that space, I can recognize it. So the biggest thing that I can say has been an awareness of who I am in this space, this bag, this environment. this journey, okay, we call life.
I was thinking that as you were saying it, just that it's the awareness. It's the awareness that you are happy. It's the awareness, like we take these conversations and we go deep into how we're feeling. We're considering how we're feeling. We're considering what is showing up in life and what someone said or did and how that impacted us. And then within the groups, within the sharing, then we get that resonance. We get that how it connects in conversation, how then one idea I will say, then you will have an idea off of that. And then within this just our conversation expands into something so connected, which is one of the laws, like law of divine oneness. We're all connected. But when we see it in motion like that, then you're able to almost apply it from this little small group to the larger group, which is the world and life and how we are all connected and the law of cause and effect and how one thing when I do something that there's an effect and so on and so on. Um, but um, but yeah, just you hearing you say that you're a better person. And but it's more that you see that you're a better person or you are aware because you've taken the time to do this work, to pour into yourself. So I see that for you for sure.
Yeah, it's like you know, when you were talking, what came to mind was symbiosis. You know, there's this level of connectedness when I didn't even aware of. And you know, when you were talking, I'm thinking about symbiosis. It reminds me of the trees and their root system, you know, and how they communicate. They're so connected. You can't see how they're connected under the earth, but they're connected, right? The other day I was in the park, and I realized how the trees are a witness from the day they were planted to where they stand today.
Through
You
all
know,
the
there's always
shenanigans of life.
exactly like everything that's happening in our environment, they're witness, they're silent witnesses. What if then the question that came up was, what if they could talk? What would they say to us? Right? So, and you know, at the back of the house, well, I live, you know, I've got this parcel and three sides is wooded. It's almost a little over half acre lot. And this wooded piece of ground, it's in a subdivision, but you know, there's only one neighbor on my south side and then neighbors across the street, but nobody on the north side. And over the years, you know, you've got all these trees. Some trees are healthy, some are not. Well, this is a good allegory. This is an allegory, actually. Every time I look at that when I'm working there. So in the beginning, oh my God, there were dead trees, there fallen trees and rotted trees. It reminds me of the mind, you know, before I started this conversation, right? There was all this junk, anger, resentment, jealousy, all of that stuff. And I'm looking at this lot with all these dead trees falling over. You could hardly walk through the forest. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to clean this up? Right? And the allegory is, you know, before we even started this whole conversation was, how am I going to transform who I am? So I thought, well, one of the first thing that came to mind was, man, you got to hire somebody to clean it up. I'm like, you got to be kidding. It's going to take forever and cost a fortune. Um, and then I put that the first couple of years, I didn't bother with it. Right? Just like, you know, when life happens, um, people either give up or they take action. So, and then after that, I've been thinking about, man, how do I do this? So I bought a chainsaw, and then I started cleaning. Man, it was like a mountain. There was so much debris. And then I thought, okay, there's got to be a way to clean this up without having to incur additional expense. Well, the expense was buying a good chainsaw, which I did. How do I get rid of the debris? And then I found out the county, the townships got burning guidelines, how to burn stuff. So I went to the township and I read their stuff. Oh, you can have a drum. You need to have a hose hooked up. You need to manage the fire. Oh, good. I didn't pull a permit. And then I started cleaning the brush, burning the brush, cleaning the brush, burning the brush.
Found the
I got
way.
into this whole conversation, with Bob. It wasn't the first time that I started into this motivational, if you will, or self improvement is another way to describe it. It wasn't the first time, but this time with Bob was like a line of demarcation for me. Then as I cleaned it, and every patch I cleaned, the trees, the next year, the flowers, you could see how they were flourishing. That's when I got
That
then.
is such a
Oh,
good visual. That's such a good visual to what we've been going through for these past years. Because yes, I even noticed it in our conversations that we used to talk about like how to fix things, how to manipulate it, how to move it. Like we used to talk about it from that perspective, and now we're talking about it more from just living and understanding and seeing and just seeing that example of how you saw this big problem that is not a problem now. It's just something that you've been working with and moving through. And that's such, I could see it. I could see how that's how it works in my mind as well. That I had this big problem. I wanted this, I needed this, and instead it's just, I've been working with myself. I've been loving myself. I've been learning me. I've been learning the insides of me. I've been learning how to see me differently, especially versus me pushing and trying to change myself in the past, and loving me as I am, working with me. But just seeing you going to the city office and learning like reading, like you had to read about this. That's
mhm.
us in the Bob Proctor program of like reading the books, reading the material, and then going out and applying the things. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful comparison there.
Yeah, it's. And then as you were talking, I'm realizing, oh, wait a minute. Sometimes you learn these things, but the power of that whole experience is sharing it. Because if you can share it, you anchor it. So
Yeah,
part
but
of the
we
exercise was,
talk about that with language all the time. Like we have these
yeah,
conversations so that we could put it into language because so many times it's just in our head, and
yeah,
just saying it without having without being wrong all the time, or just looked at wrong or judge, the judgy. It's more, this is how I'm saying it, and this is the language that I'm using for it.
yeah. It's amazing. I just realized, like, wow, what would this mastermind exercise is like we're grounding. It's like driving a ground rod into the ground, right? You're anchoring. Tony Robbins calls it anchor. You anchor it, right? And then other gurus talk about there's different groups of people. You have the groups that are anchors. They you know you can anchor it or propellers. I think Bob talks about propellers to move things forward.
Mhm.
So, and I think both have a purpose to serve.
Mhm.
Anchoring is not a bad thing. Dropping the anchor. Propellers, propels things forward. I think they have their place. I just distinguished that. Wait a minute, because in the context of which Bob was talking about that, you want to watch the anchors, you know, and it sounds like you want to stay away from anchors, but I think in practice, I think they both serve a purpose, and one of the
The polarity.
one of huh?
The polarity.
Yes, there is polarity at play there. And most importantly, I think it's almost like um, if you want to own something or you want to seal something, you got to anchor it. So it becomes like who you are from an operational state, right?
Mm.
And then it's time to, move to whatever else that needs to get worked out in life. That's the propellers, or a goal in life, or a thing that you want to accomplish in life. That's the propellers. But you don't want to get stuck on being an anchor all the time, because then there's no movement, right? There's no motion. Wow. Okay. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
This is actually a perfect example of how the conversations go, how we're just like one thought to the next to the next. Okay, so but then here's my question to you. After all that we've been studying, as far as the universal laws go, what would you say, if you could even answer this, is your favorite law or maybe like set of laws that you really understand or that you like working with or like knowing or studying? What would you say is the ones that call out to you? There's so many.
At the heart is the vibration.
Yeah.
At the heart of it all is the vibration,
Same.
which I think it's the primary law, and then you have all the secondary laws that, because we live in an ocean of motion, and it's just amazing when there's motion. There's magic happening at different levels and different spaces, and that's the beauty of the law of vibration itself, as I think of it. Because when you ask the question, that's the first thing that jumped out. Polarity. If you think about the law of polarity, well, there's motion. There has to be motion, because without motion, nothing exists.
And that
Right? In
motion
in
is
life,
on that vibration.
yes. So where there's just constant vibration. Even as we're looking at each other, we're vibrating at such a low level. We get to see things that's solid, but things that are moving at a faster vibration, we don't see, we don't recognize. And it reminds me of dogs, how dogs can hear things at a certain frequency we don't have access to. Some people do, but mostly not every human being does. So that's another level of it. You see, so, oh, wait a minute. So, and part of this whole law of vibration, you're talking about, we get to learn how to vibrate. It reminds me of the Hawking scale,
Yes.
and the Hawking scale, we can vibrate it. So it's such a wide range, and things aren't available. Certain things aren't available unless you're vibrating in that frequency.
Yep.
And that's the piece that I am I'm in pursuit of. I really want to understand it at the the most infinitesimal level for myself. You know, how there's certain things that vibrate, to say they're vibrating at a certain level. I'm like, okay, how do I get up here, right? How do I get there? So I'm in vibration long enough. So the other the other learning lesson is, how do I get there? One, two, how do I stay in that vibration such that whatever that desire is that vibrates at that level is attracted. I'm attracted to it. It's like a magnet. I get to hook onto it. I get to latch onto it. I get to become my experience, my lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the space that I'm like in right now.
Yeah.
How do I?
Yeah, I know that scale because we talked about that in our last meeting. Um, and shame is at that lowest like 20 vibration
Mm,
versus like love is at that
mm,
500. But even in the numbers like from 20 to 500 is such a huge there's that the polarity that we're talking about, and so but there's also so
yeah,
many things in between that. So talking to a client yesterday, we were talking about how like shame is yes down here, but fear is in the middle, so it's almost like better to be in fear, to be in desire, to be in some of these other, be in anger versus shame. And so it really does point to like going up through the levels of consciousness versus just
mm,
trying to go straight from joy straight from shame to joy. Like there's this path to consciousness. You go from shame and then some anger about it and some fear and then desire, and it's in our chat. I don't know it by heart right now, but there's there's levels to it. There's pieces to it. It goes back to your tree story that it didn't just happen overnight, that there's levels, there's education, there's things that are shifted on and off, and that's what I notice in these conversations too, is that a lot of times we show up where we're in one vibration, but by the end of it, from all of us sharing and all of us in resonance with each other, we leave these calls like so uplifted, and we take on the day with so much power. So there's that too. We raise each other's vibration. So
yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of the quantum, the quantum leap, right? There's also this world of quantum leaps, um, which it's like, how do I explain this? Uh, which is available, right? So we get to choose how we want to make that jump. You want to do the incremental stuff, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, and or you want to compress things and just make a quantum leap, right? So yes, I love the quantum, but to be the quantum, but to take the quantum requires quantum, right? To do the step, yeah, it requires step. You want to do quantum, you do. There is more work.
mhm.
So that word keeps coming up, right? So work is the physical law of the universe that produces energy, right? There's a certain amount of work that needs to go into it, into whatever step. Is it a step or is it quantum? So if you want to do the quantum, there's a certain amount of work that needs to be compressed so it provides that quantum jump. Wow.
This is the observation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the space that I'm dealing with right now. Or the question is, how do I quantumize it? How do I quantumize what I'm up to?
Hmm.
Right? Because this life, we only have so many years that are productive to live, that we have to create a pad that can serve the duration of time as we exist.
Hmm.
So the conversation is, okay, how do I engage? How do I generate? It's a generative conversation as well. It doesn't happen by invocation. You've got to generate something.
Hmm.
Something's got to get generated. Energy's got to get generated. So there's input. It's a multifaceted conversation. So you got to get input to get output. So the question is, the output is going to equal input. So how much input do I need to get output?
There we go.
You know,
Well, you know,
sometimes,
I'm laughing right now just because this is like a perfect example of how we spend these Friday morning conversations of just being in it, just letting it kind of naturally come up, how whatever that is, and then it sparks something. It sparks something. So we are getting closer to the end of our time here. So I just want to jump in and say, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to or being open to recording this with me, for giving my audience a view into my life, into your world, into all the things here. And yeah, I feel like this is, I say this, but I feel like this is our first conversation online, but I don't think it will be our last. I think this is a good continuing piece here. So if I would love to have you back. And anything you would like to share before we say goodbye? Any final thoughts
no, it's
that come up
like,
for?
yeah, it's a launch pad. So now you get to launch.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a launching with a question, right? So it's a big question mark. How do we launch? And what does launching? You're always launching. Every day you wake up is a launch. Like seriously, the more I've been going into this conversation, I uncovered another piece of our self awareness conversation is stoicism.
Mm.
The how they lived and why they did things the way they did,
Mm-hmm.
which weaves deep into what we are talking about right now is the different laws, right? They were way ahead of their time,
Mm.
the Stoics. So I'm really fascinated by that. And their conversation is with rigor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a helpful tool to integrate into who we're being today is rigor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, beautiful. Okay, well, wishing you a wonderful day and thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming. And until next time.
Thank you for joining us today for a soul nourishing episode of Soul Brew, where healing conversations flow as freely as the tea. I hope you found solace, wisdom, and inspiration in our dialogue. And until next time, take a moment to sip slow, breathe deep, and embrace the healing power of connection. Stay tuned for more heartwarming conversations over tea. And until then, may your cup overflow with peace and serenity. Take care.